Yeah, I think we're ready to go. Today is Monday, May 8th, 2023. Call our meeting of the Nome Common Council to order. Mr. Clerk, will you call the roll to establish a quorum?
Councilmember Henderson.
Here.
Councilmember Jug Johnson is excused. Councilmember Mark Johnson.
Here.
Councilmember Martinson.
Here.
Councilmember Pasoya.
Here.
Councilmember Tupcott.
Jenna.
And Youth Representative Miller is excused. We have a quorum.
Thank you. Moving on to approval of agenda. Is there a motion to approve the agenda?
I'll make the motion.
Okay, Mr. Councilmember Henderson, Councilmember Martinson. We're going to strike the new business item off the agenda. As we're not able to have the party here for the meeting. Is there any objection to doing that? Seeing
Yes, sir.
none?
I guess I get to talk during the.
When we get to public communications? Yeah. There's no other noted additions, deletions, corrections. Roll call please on the vote.
Councilmember Mark Johnson.
Yes.
Councilmember Martinson.
Yes.
Councilmember Pasoya.
Yes.
Councilmember Tupcott.
Yes.
Councilmember Henderson.
Yes.
Motion carries.
Thank you. That brings us to the approval of minutes. We have our minutes from the 24th of April.
I'll make the motion. Second.
Thank you, Councilmember Henderson, Councilmember Paskoya. If there are any noted changes other than ministerial, we'll move to a roll call, please, on their adoption.
Councilmember Mark Johnson.
Yes.
Councilmember Martinson.
Yes.
Councilmember Pasoya.
Yes.
Councilmember Tupcott.
Yes.
Councilmember Henderson.
Yeah.
Motion carries.
Thank you. Moving on to communications then. The first item we have is from the city clerk with regard to the application for tax exemption. Received 5-1 by James Abbott. How does the council wish to proceed on this matter?
Make a motion to accept the untimely filed tax exemption form as timely filed.
Second.
Thank you, Councilmember Mark Johnson, Councilmember Henderson. Any discussion?
Under discussion, just when we get done with this, I'd like to talk some more on this subject after we vote, because it's not particularly on this particular individual.
Okay. Roll call please on the item for Mr. Abbott as a timely file.
Councilmember Martinson.
Yes.
Councilmember Pasoya.
Yes.
Councilmember Tupcott.
Yes.
Councilmember Henderson.
Yes.
Councilmember Mark Johnson.
Yes.
Motion carries.
Thank you. Briefly with regard to untimely filed applications, Councilmember Mark Johnson.
Thank you. So I did a little research when this came up on the agenda again. And the reason, I know that we on the council know that the exemption that we're talking about is $150,000 for a senior citizen exemption off of property tax. What a lot of people may not know is it's mandated by state law or by the state that we do that, and not just the city isn't making that designation. And municipalities throughout the state that have property tax all have $150,000. What I'd like for us to consider, and I think I've proposed this in the past, but I look to see if there's other organizations or other municipalities in the state that make it where their senior citizens have to come in every year. And the only one that I could not find, or the only one I could find that does that is Kodiak. But Homer, Kenai Peninsula Bureau, Fairbanks, Anchorage, City of Cordova, Dilling. Try to pick some like-kind municipality in size and some that our property tax assessor mentioned that he already goes to as well. but they all have a provision that once you turn 65, you put in your application, and then you no longer need to submit one every single year, and we wouldn't have to every single year have to grant this exemption. And there's language in these that makes it the senior citizens' responsibility to report to the city if they move or they change their status with their house. So I think it'd be less burden on our senior citizens. And the other part that's interesting, I found out, I've heard that since we've raised not we have raised, the assessor raised the assessed value, that some senior citizens that are here are saying it's really more, it's making it more difficult for them to, even with the exemption, to add to their property tax burden along with the other cost of living. And I found other organizations that are supportive of their senior citizens beyond $150,000. And I think that if we have some future work sessions dealing with exemptions, possibly we could also look at the exemption of whether we want to consider adding additional, like one might have $50,000 above the 150. So the first 200,000 is exempt as opposed to the 150. And the reason for that is with assessments going up, these senior citizens are on fixed income, and it encourages our senior citizens to stay in town rather than move away and add to the economy. So
Thank you for that. We'll put that off to a work session, and I guess I have several examples of where that would not necessarily work, at least when it comes to other ways that accounts are held in this community, including some, I think, of taxpayers, but unfortunately, those citizens are no longer here to let you know that they no longer are here. Moving on then, the next item is the U-Haul cleanup is coming up here at the end of the month. And as the city manager noted last time, still paying a bounty to get old cars and trucks out and snow goes. And then there's free dumping at the Montefill at the end of the month. And a organized cleanup on Saturday, June 3rd, that hopefully some people will participate in. That brings us then on to citizens' comments, and Mr. Lee.
Thank you. My name's Charlie Lean. I'm here to offer a few words on my friend and colleague, Tom Vaden, who recently announced his retirement from the ambulance service. And so Tom and I have known each other 30-some years. Shortly after he moved to Nome as a corrections officer, he signed up with the ambulance. At the time, it was the ambulance service, not the department. I was the president. There was a chief as well, Hunter. And eventually a few years later, we became part of the city, and he continued with it. And so he's a founding member of the Nome Volunteer Ambulance Department.
Service.
With the department. He was not an original, I don't know who's alive that still was an original member of the service.
Oh, okay.
But anyway, he served as an officer for nearly the entire time. He became a training officer right away. He's a college educated educator. He really sunk his teeth into teaching emergency service things and was very successful at that. He was employed by the hospital corporation as a trainer. Originally, he was a QUARC employee, then that. He became so well known that his curriculum for health aid training and telemedicine were taught up until just a few years ago as the standard. So he was foundational in telemedicine for health aids. And it sure was nice to have Tom on the service as our training officer because he saw the need for evening sessions training. if you ask volunteers to take time off from their regular job to do 120-hour, 140-hour EMT1 course, it doesn't fly. It has to be an evening training or a weekend training or both. He was really good at that. He interfaced very well with our sponsoring physician. Most of the time that was Dr. O'Neill, but we had a number of those. Training officer had to help set the policy and protocols for the ambulance care and then enforce that. So the run sheets that we produce after a call would go to the sponsoring physician. The sponsoring physician would review that, and it fell on Tom to come back and tell us, hey, you're doing it wrong. Better fix this. The city of Nome really owes us thank you for the standard of care that we've received for so many years. He's involved in a lot of public service. Served as an officer in the Army, was a corrections officer, was an EMT, received numerous awards from the state for Trainer of the Year, EMT of the Year, Administrator of the Year. And not only that, he wrote recommendations for a lot of us. And somebody hadn't suggested that I get at least one of the awards I got. Tom was the guy that set me up. So anyway, very appreciated. That really figures into the morale of volunteers. I know I'm preaching to the choir. Volunteers don't get paid. Volunteers do it out of the goodness of their heart, but also for an opportunity to learn, an opportunity for recognition, and it really goes a long way to say thank you. So when we had a promising recruit, we made sure they got to the state EMS symposium. We made sure they got recognized and patted on the back for their successes. And Tom was foundational as an officer in doing it in the ambulance service. Because he worked for Health Corporation, and because he kind of had split loyalties between health aides, which he cares deeply about, and the ambulance service, which he also cared deeply about, he didn't really compete for the vice chair or the chairmanship or the chief of the ambulance service. But he was an officer for more than 20 of those 30 years that he served. Anyway, I'm not as organized as I could be. I wanted to say that Tom, in my estimation, is the one of the longest serving volunteers in town. He hands down has more ambulance calls than anyone else ever in Nome. I guesstimate it's 5,000 runs. I served 32 years and had about 3,000 for comparison's sake. He carried the ambulance not only himself, but by dragging along all his trainees and using them as assistants on ambulance. So we're going to miss him. He deeply cares, still does, but time catches up with everyone. So I'm really gratified to see that you guys are considering a recognition for him. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Mr. Costo.
Thank you. My name is Paul Costo. Thank you, Charlie. That was wonderful. I'm a student of Tom Baden's, and I appreciate that. I'm actually here tonight to talk real briefly, just to get onto the record. There's a number of vendors and merchants, both online and locally, that are still charging the 2% seasonal sales tax. I did reach out to Glenn, and he responded very quickly when he got back today on Monday that he would look into this, but I want to get on the record that this is still an ongoing issue, and communication is obviously the failure point in this process, and I'm just hoping that the city can, as soon as possible, rectify that globally, quite frankly. I know that I've had a number of people call me and reach out to me showing receipts, and a number of times the tax difference is quite a bit. It can be $10, $20, $30, $100 in difference in the tax, depending on what you're buying. So if the city can, and I'm sure that Glenn will do exactly what he said, but I want to get on the record that this is still ongoing. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Are there others? Right, moving on then to unfinished business 01. Mr. Clerk, would you read that by title?
O-23-0501, an ordinance authorizing the short-term lease of block 63, parcels 13A and 13.
Thank you. Council stand in recess to take public testimony on this ordinance. Are there members of the public who would like to address the council on this piece of business? Seeing no one wave their hand or stamp their feet, the council will come back into session 7:15, same time. Is there a motion to adopt ordinance 23-05?
Make that motion.
Thank you. Councilmember Piscoya, Councilmember Martinson. Anything else? Any questions, comments? Not, roll call please on its adoption.
Councilmember Piscoya.
Yes.
Councilmember Topcock.
Yes.
Councilmember Henderson.
Request to be excused.
You may be on the conflict, yes. Thank you for
Councilmember.
that.
Sorry. Councilmember Mark Johnson.
Yes.
Councilmember Martinson.
Yes.
Motion carries.
Thank you. That brings us on to utility report, Mr. Morton.
Good evening, Ken Morton on behalf of Nome Joint Utilities. Realize I have two sets of glasses, so it should be in pretty good shape. The overhaul is going fine. It's been going about 2 weeks, and we're going to have at least that much longer to go. We had the EWT crew in town to do the semi-annual servicing of the EWT wind turbines. Nothing really much to report, other than they got stuck with a tractor vehicle up on Windmill Hill. But the wind turbines are doing fine. We've got some projects going through review right now. The Upland Drive project that we're doing with DOT, the battery project that we're doing with AEA. Word of funding from NSEDC to advance the Moonlight Springs pressurization, lagoon aeration, and a SCADA project for the lift stations. We are shifting back to the Block 113, Block 114. We still haven't heard from bloody EPA yet on the state road. But we'll move it. Fuel purchases, we've purchased about 1.2 million. We've agreed to purchase about 1.2 million gallons of fuel at this point with the set price. Any questions about this or anything else related to NGU?
Regarding the drainage, I know a citizen brought that up during the assessments the other day, but how are we doing on our opening the drains, or are there any issues with drainage between Public Works and utilities?
They're going down the sewer manholes that surround us.
Yeah, just a couple culverts that haven't opened up yet, but everything else is fine.
And when you see it bubbling out of the manhole, what's happening there? I saw that.
More water coming in than can go out.
Okay.
Back pressure.
Faithful.
Yeah.
Those are not sanitary sewer manholes. Those are stormwater manholes.
Thank you.
A lot of our drains tie into the state's drains, and so if the state hasn't opened up across Front Street, they'll bubble up at Front Street.
That's what I think happened on the one I saw.
Every year.
And that's outside the city's control.
But we work with the state to
We
try to
do.
encourage them to open it up so that we can not have that happen, right?
I mean, all of our, I just want,
one of the things that Cole worked on last fall was making sure all the heat tracers were gonna be working. And I know we worked with Martin, but, you know, some of the drains are frozen out in the ocean, and I don't know how you address that, but, you know, and I know that Cole has worked to help the state open up some of their drains that, you know, drain openings, so I think everybody's done everything that we can, unless you got some ideas.
I think last year was worse. This has been a colder spring. It's slowed by that.
K Street's not been an issue this year.
Well, we made some improvements. That's what they did. They made improvements down there.
Yeah, that was a big thing last year. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. City Manager.
I got noticed by an email or a text message while I was away in regards to apparently some vendors that were collecting sales tax, even though they were all, or notices were put out through the city clerk's office after the referendum result. So I did make a decision. I you know, and I didn't know who they were. I just got this email. So I emailed back and asked that the chamber put out a notice to their business members to make sure their business members were not charging over the 5%. Our filing system will only allow you to file at 5%. So that if someone has collected 2% more, you need to go to the vendor who you were doing business with. The money does not come to the city because our filing forms we'll just call they're almost dummy proof because it will not allow you to file more sales tax than the city has authorized. So the comments that this is money that the city is collecting is not accurate. So they're gonna have to go back to the vendor to address that. We are following up. In fact, I sent out an email to one very large food business in town to make sure that they weren't collecting it. I know the other supermarket had already spoken with me 2 months ago, so I knew they weren't collecting it. Other than that, you know, we're doing everything we can to remind the businesses. But as Brian and I were talking earlier, you know, we're talking hundreds, you know, and maybe even to a low thousand in businesses from on-site here and off-site that pay us sales tax. And Amazon is a very unique creature. Amazon sells things themselves, but then they are just the shipper for other companies. So I don't know if it's all the fault of Amazon or not, or whether it's their local, one of their local vendors, which is sending a notice to Amazon to ship it for a fee. So we are following up. We take it very seriously. And obviously, we don't want to pay anybody to pay more sales tax than we ask for or required under law. Other than that, I know that Councilmember Johnson and the mayor met on with folks through the Murdered and Indigenous Women projects on trying to having more impact on that. So other than that, you saw my report on 3D housing. I was astounded. I got a better understanding from just seeing those videos that we all saw on how this is working and how this is really a practical way of addressing this. And HUD is putting money into this because they are believing that this is one of the ways that they can address the over 4 million shortage in affordable housing units across the country. And we know there's a $2.7 billion, I don't know how that equates into numbers for Alaska, but, it's $2.7 billion in housing shortfall. So that's all I actually had, gentlemen.
Okay, thank you.
And a short executive session,
And the purpose?
personnel and legal.
Any questions for the city manager?
No, but I had somebody come in my office later this afternoon, to bring up the sales tax thing, brought receipts in actually. But they got it, and I kind of reassured them the same thing, that it's almost because they thought the city was collecting the extra 2%. And I said, it's almost impossible for the city to do that, especially if you're online. And even with the handwritten, our old forms, you still submitted 5%, so. They were assured that that their vendors were actually collecting extra money from them and not necessarily remitting it to the city.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Isn't it the responsibility of the rural, or the online remote sales tax commission to, I mean, if we're communicating with them, that they communicate with all of the online vendors? Because I don't think the city really has a lot of direct communication between the Amazons and the online vendors. It's really the remote sales tax commission that communicates
That's correct.
with them, so.
They're in the contract, and that was some of the challenge when we were putting a moratorium on the collection of this, the seasonal sales tax. They needed a longer lead time
So they could
to communicate to their vendors that they were collecting from.
Similar to how local businesses here have to renew their sales tax license annually with the city, they also, the remote sellers have to renew their, I'm pretty sure, tax license with the remote sellers tax commission. I mean, maybe that's not correct, I don't know.
I believe so, but I don't know exactly the process that they go through.
As long as the remote, I mean, it's really kind of their responsibility, I would think, to communicate any changes in the tax code, to the remote sellers and the Amazons of the world, so.
And they did, I double checked their website today, and it's been up since April 1st. It has had the correct sales tax rate on it going forward.
Yeah.
It's the companies that either didn't read it.
I think a lot of companies they're automatically changed based on previous, they effective May 1, they may just have it set automatically and they have to go in and change that because it was changed by a referendum. So,
And I did talk to some of the bigger ones like Vertex and Avalara and informed them. So it's out there. It's been,
Right.
I think I spoke to them in December.
And the other question I've got is, I asked Glenn last time for an update on the commercial aviation sales, personal property tax issue. In last meeting, you said you look into what the issues were. I was just asking a question, what was the status of it?
Well,
You
I
said you'd
think
get back
there
to
was
me
a
on
lot of discussion. There were some people who, it's like anything else. When it personally affects them, some people express their concern about charging on personal property for planes. We also wanted to bring Arnie in, he's coming in anyway, we sent him an email to discuss what other communities are doing, especially on the landings and takeoffs and how that's done as another revenue source. But apparently it was discussed and the council decided not to move forward with it.
When was that?
2013.
In 2013? Yeah, I know it's come up and John I was just asking questions on it. Can we set a work session on this issue?
Anybody else want to talk about it?
Can we do it like just look at our exemptions as a whole, because that would include airplanes and include possible other exemptions as we look at having increased assessments and stuff. Property issue is kind of hot right now, so we can look at the property tax.
If you want to put other exceptions or exemptions in there, that's fine.
Yeah, I'd be certainly up for that, looking at our current exemptions and our property taxes.
So did the council ever vote on it?
Not that I know of. I can look back through the folders.
It's become obviously, it seems like it comes up every few years, especially when there's property tax increases or assessments or the budgets are tight or whatever, so. maybe we should put this issue to bed once and for all, if that's the issue.
We did in 2013, but apparently we didn't.
How did we put it to bed?
Huh?
How did we put it to bed?
Council
Well,
at the
that
time.
council.
2019, and it seems like the council.
Talked about it since I've been on here. Never went past. Just
That was
talking
probably-
about it. Yeah.
So what, I guess, what's the reason that aircraft are exempt? I mean, if there's a reason not to do it, I'm just,
Well,
Part
then,
of
yeah,
it's
let's,
probably-
let's do this in a work session.
think, can we set a work session tonight? Can we put it on
No,
schedule?
we'll,
Why can't we put it on tonight, John?
tonight? No, we
No,
can't do
no,
it tonight.
set a date tonight,
We'll get to
instead of
that.
it keep getting pushed off
We'll get to that.
indefinitely. When are we gonna look at it?
We'll get to that.
Okay.
Another question for the city manager.
Please.
I saw that Nikki put together some sales tax reports at a request, I think, from
Right.
Councilman Henderson, and they're really helpful. I just was wondering, where does marijuana fall in the, because one of the things we're trying to look at is how much extra we can getting from online sales, because that's a new revenue source than what we've had in the past, and also we're getting additional revenue from marijuana stores being open, which weren't always here. I'm just wondering, in the sales tax category, where does that fall into? I know the online probably gets distributed amongst all of them, or a number of them anyway. So it's not broken out separately, but if somebody's to report marijuana sales, is it services, other, what is trying to, tobacco?
Well, there were guidelines that we were given, but Nikki, where is marijuana?
So I can tell you specifically that I saw some of it in the other category for F-22, which is what's driving that up. But I would like to look into it a little closer because it could have also been some of it in services.
Okay, that makes a lot of sense, because it definitely increased from FY20 to FY22 from 259 up to 518. So that would be one good measurement of potential additional revenue that we're getting from that source. And then I know that it's not a line item, but there's no way to say these are online sales versus in-town sales. Is there a way to do a report that we don't have to say who the vendors are, because there's a lot of vendors now that pay online sales tax.
It's in there. I think it's in the,
Well, it's in there, but we don't know how much, I'd be curious to see how much we're getting from that.
on the online?
Yeah.
I think it's in there. It's been, it's around 500 and something thousand.
Maybe I missed it.
And then there's a breakdown too, the very last page, which is the business category, and I think that was the one for the breakdown.
Maybe I missed it. Maybe.
The very last page is that is from ARSSTC.
Yeah, so that's the,
It's right there.
the sales tax for 2022 is 553,000.
Correct.
Okay, I didn't see that, I didn't see the category where that's.
Because I had asked for the breakdown, and that's the category that.
All right, thank you. Yeah. All right, so it's there, thank you for that. That's good information.
So what is services? Is that primarily one particular or several industries? Or is it just a smorgasbord of a lot of stuff?
Services,
Yeah, I was just curious. It's the third largest or fourth largest, second largest category.
it can be anything from thawing a drain line to tours, it's almost everything in town.
Everything besides food. and
Providing
oil and-
services.
Yeah, and any service that you're talking about,
Any plumbers,
you know, plumbers,
Carpenters.
carpenters, construction, or no, construction's got its own.
Yeah,
It's quite wide.
Auto
accounting
sales,
services.
Auto repair.
Auto repair services, that makes sense.
And the food obviously is just retail sales. It's not restaurants or anything else, obviously.
Correct.
I think food is,
They had food and
Yeah,
restaurants
we got
separately.
food and
There's a
restaurants.
separate restaurant category.
Okay, thank you for that information. Any other?
I was looking at the board director's report and I do see that there is a
You haven't had it yet.
Incidental hazard authorization for public comment, are we advertising that?
Well, first of all, I want to recognize Joy because she's also got another issue she wants to talk about. And we'll talk about what real wishes, but we're going to have a public hearing up here. I don't know what you were doing when my face was.
I was surfing. I can talk or I can wait till.
Why don't you
Okay.
come up and
I will.
the question the council member Scoya was asking, and also the,
Advertising the public comment for incidental.
The incidental hazard
Hazard
assessment that the
authorization.
NOAA has issued that public comment period. And the Corps website and on the Corps website. And I believe their tribal liaisons shared it with all of the local organizations. We can put it on our website tomorrow.
Okay.
It came out on May 1st, and it's a 30-day comment period to June 1st.
So,
Absolutely.
thanks.
And there's a correction to the public meeting for next week for the project that the Corps and the city are hosting. The meeting has gone back and forth between the 17th to the 16th and back to the 17th because of the graduation confusion. It is the official public meeting is Wednesday, the 17th at 5 p.m. at the Mini. They issued the press release today, so they said no more changes. That's all I have unless there's more questions.
any other updates on this board?
We're really wishing the snow to go away. We can't see town because the snow pile is so big. I'm just, yeah, no, we can't see this way, but we have new staff. We hired Carolyn Akvalak for our front desk purchasing per office manager that we will be sharing with Public Works. Our full-time accounting clerk is in town for 2 weeks, Caitlin Leclerc, who is in town to train Carolyn. Alex is back from the dispatch office. And I'm blanking on his last name. I don't know why, it's just Thompson. He's back today. They've done all their HAZWOPER today. And yeah, things are really moving there this week. Everybody's in the office this week. It's kind of weird. And what?
You're in the office.
And that's kind of what I'm saying. Yeah, we all don't know how to act. I'm sure there's plenty more to share, but those are the priorities. The public meeting next week on Wednesday, it's 5 p.m., encourage as many people to come as possible. That's why we made sure there wasn't a conflict with graduation. Because the Corps really wants to put the info out on where we stand, and we're really close to between 95 and 100%. And then the project will go out to bid this summer, and the awards will be made in January, February of 24. So next year, there will be a contractor selected unless something goes real awry. Which contractor that is and how much they've been able to work on having rock set aside to take action will determine whether there's any in-water work. There's a good chance there may not be, but there will be the contractor and his crews will be in town working on their yard prep and their rock prep, and things will still be moving in 24, in the summer season.
Thank you. Anything else? All right, moving on then to citizens' comments. Are there other folks in the audience that would like to address the council? Seeing no indication, move on to council member comments. Will you call the roll, please, Mr. Clerk?
Councilmember Tapcock.
Fire again at the end. She may have had to leave.
Councilmember Pearson.
I wanted to say congratulations to Nugget for being the best weekly newspaper award from the Alaska Press Club for, I believe, the second year in a row. So that's pretty impressive. Small town, just in the state for 2 years running, so good job. And I like Councilmember Mark Johnson's idea about automatically exempting senior citizens. They apply once for the $150,000 tax exemption on their property. And then unless that exemption remains in place, if there's reasons to not do that or to qualify the exception, that's fine. A lot of the exemptions or untimely requests we get are regarding the senior citizen exemption. So, or the senior, and I think it only applies to the primary residence, if I'm correct, and especially if it's baked in state statute. I think it would be nice to have that process maybe a little bit easier. So if there needs to be a work session to do that, I think we should do it while the topic is current, instead of waiting for it to die on the vine. Regarding the aircraft issue, I brought this up a couple times, and I don't understand it, and I was hoping folks could help me understand it. It's always puzzled me why commercial aircraft, which is probably one of the biggest business sectors in this community, are exempt from paying property tax on their equipment and assets, or aircraft in specific. Construction companies, as an example, they pay property taxes, personal property taxes on their fleets, 30, 40 years old, every year. Trucking operations, maritime operations, they pay personal property taxes on their equipment every single year. I've asked for a work session to understand that issue better. It seems like it comes up every couple of years. It came up in 2014. It came up again, at least in 2019. And it seems like it comes up when budgets are squeezed, because we're all looking for ways to spread the tax burden out equally. We're looking for ways to generate more revenue. And I understand that it hasn't maybe come to a vote before, but it would be really helpful for me to understand, and I think for a lot of people in this community to understand why. Is there a specific reason that commercial aviation is exempt from the personal property tax when I don't believe any other business segment in Nome is exempt? When the assessor was here last week, he indicated that there's a very easy and fair way to do that if the taxes are charged, and it's based on a landing tax. And he is willing to speak to the council on that issue. So I would request that when the assessor is here, and he can explain it, that we have a work session to understand this issue better. And if I need another council member to convince the mayor to have a work session, then we can certainly do that. Is that what's necessary?
We're not going to do it underneath the city manager's report. It didn't have anything to do with the city manager.
Okay, when is it appropriate then?
We can talk about it right now, or I will
Okay.
bring it up. I have it on my list to talk about it when I get to my time.
Okay, can we request, well, before I relinquish my time, can we get a work session scheduled then?
Yes, we can.
Okay, thank you. Those are my comments.
Thank you.
Councilmember Mark Johnson.
I don't want to spend more time speaking hot air after we already talked about it before, but when I was looking at an ordinance from Homer, I almost felt like I was reading it, something for Nome. It's under they have a bunch of whereases like normally these things do. But whereas the cost of living and purchasing food that's put in Nome is significantly higher than the rest of Alaska, whereas many senior citizens within the city of Nome are living on fixed incomes and social security benefits that do not keep pace with cost of living. This is where they basically chose to increase the for senior citizens based on an assessment that happened in Homer back in 2004. So there must have been an assessment adjustment back then that kind of got the attention like our current assessment has. And that's why I'm asking for us to at least take a look at something that might benefit our few senior citizens that we have left here in town to help them with their, meeting their expenses and to also encourage them to stay in town as opposed to moving away.
Thank you.
Councilmember Martinson,
I have nothing.
Councilmember Pasquale,
Look forward to the tax exemption discussion and work session. And happy spring hunting to those that are spring hunting.
Thank you.
so Six said she had no comments except for congratulating Kelly on graduating soon.
Okay, great. Thank you. That moves on to nearest comments. As Glenn noted, Councilmember Mark Johnson and I attended an hour and a half good meeting, I think, with 3 representatives out of Anchorage with the Department of Justice. They were here in connection with the Missing and Murdered Indigenous Peoples program, Indigenous Persons program. And the folks that are responsible for operating that. I think they had several good suggestions of ways that we may be able to benefit the community as far as funding opportunities, whether it be us or some of the other programs in the town that deal with prevention and providing alternate activities so that we don't go down. That there's an open line of communication between NPD and DOJ, and that sometimes we don't always know about what's going on the things, but to rest assured that there's often work going on in the background that for to maintain integrity of investigation we may not be aware of. Graduations are coming up here real soon. I don't know the exact date of the high school thing, but that and Northwest Campus as well. And then Joy mentioned, I think it's around the 24th or so, but check with the schools to get the actual date. The public meeting with the Corps of Engineers on the 17th, 5 p.m. to 7 p.m. And this is virtual, but it's also available in town. Yes, no? At the mini convention center. So if you're here in town and wish to appear in public or in person, feel free to show up at the mini convention, but you do have an option to get on virtually as well. Coming up Tuesday, 6 p.m. at the rec center, there's a neat little demonstration going on with the Taekwondo program that Dan Skolton's running. He's got a lot of new kids and more kids that are in it. So they'll have a little demonstration of what they're doing. So I'd encourage people to attend that. There also is some kind of a sports thing at the high school going on the same evening. So there's no reason for anybody to sit home and not have something to do that evening. If more interesting things than TV, being you can't even get regular TV in Nome anymore. So the BOE is scheduled for May 31, June 1, and June 2, and will continue as necessary. We're hoping that as a result of the extension of time, that the 169 appeals will be whittled down. Anybody that did apply, you should have or will be getting calls from the contract assessors to review your appeal and see if there's any information necessary or it can be resolved at the assessor level, and otherwise it will come to the BOE during those dates. Just one point of clarification, aircraft is all aircraft, it is not just commercial. And I don't know if that's for Part 135, what that number really means, but that includes, any of the other little planes that are private that are parked along the thing are also exempt. It is not just commercial aircraft. So just for that. And being we want to have Arnie participate in the work session for sales tax, I'm going to suggest 9:00 3rd, because we'll have Arnie here May 3rd, and we'll take advantage of his time. We do it Saturday at 10 a.m. What do people think about that?
A work session on Saturday.
Yep.
I think it's a terrible idea.
Okay.
I think is we should have it when the public can attend and most council members can attend.
Anybody else?
Was that a serious, I'm just questioning, was that a serious suggestion?
Did you want
Hold it on
Arnie present?
Saturday. Yeah, and he can't come during the week when he's attending the BOE?
He is here working on the BOE stuff. We can schedule him again, but I was trying to get it in connection with his meeting.
If we
And we're
need,
not gonna argue here.
I'm not arguing with you,
Okay.
John,
Okay.
and I understand why you're trying to do that.
No, you don't, council member.
I don't.
No.
Why don't we, if, he doesn't have to be here physically, he can be here virtually like everybody else.
Okay. You said when he was in town, so I took you at your word. Anyway, we won't argue. Brian, when is a date that's available, that we don't have another work session in the next 3-4 weeks?
I'm sorry, one more time?
Do we have a work session scheduled next, in 2 weeks?
I believe we do. Nikki, do we need the last meeting before second reading of the budget?
I thought we had a work session scheduled on May 15th, which is not a meeting night, but I don't know if we'll have updated numbers yet.
Okay, so that may slip. So how about if we just say June 12th?
Can we have it earlier than that? We can have this meeting during our budget cycle and not at the end of the budget cycle.
Okay.
Because it potentially could affect the budget. Is that correct, right?
No.
No, we cannot do an ordinance in that.
An ordinance takes at least 2 readings, separated by 2 weeks to pass.
But we could start the process
And then you're gonna have
before
to
the
have,
budget cycle is complete.
we have no information on any aircraft. We would have to go through all of the stuff that Arnie has done up until now. And then that would issue, possibly if it's not a landing tax, if you decide on anything that is present here, then we would have to issue a supplementary roll and give them the 30 days.
Let's just try, although you're gonna be tired out that week, we'll just meet, and then we're here for 3 days for BOE, so let's just make, let's just add it to the 30, 20, whatever, I
22nd.
can't read the calendar there.
22nd?
No, that, second and fourth, is it not?
Oh,
29th is
it's Memorial Day.
Memorial
Oh,
Day,
okay, so we're not doing it that day.
so
Temper expectations, there's very little chance that this is going to be in effect for this tax year.
Okay, that didn't change the discussion though.
What time of that day is the BOE?
At 5 p.m. or 5:30.
well, let me ask,
4 o'clock meeting, but too early in the day because people are still working.
just, we haven't gotten a huge amount of feedback on where the council is satisfied with what the presentation is at this point. I mean, the question is, we have extra work sessions for the budget. Do you take one of those work sessions and Arnie to attend? That way the public can get here from 5:30 to 7.
We have something scheduled supposedly for the 15th, but Nikki indicated we wouldn't have potentially numbers for that. Let's just slide that off a week and then let's use May 15th. Although Bryant indicates having information by next week.
I don't see it happening, but if we can,
He can talk about the concept, and then and I think it's a broader discussion on, one of the reasons we've also asked the firm is to take a look at personal property, if we're getting paid the full amount that we should be receiving on personal property for other industries.
Well, trying to squeeze it into May seems like it's problematic. So how about the meeting in June and first meeting in June in connection with that?
It's fine.
okay, so we're back to June 12th.
Yep. All right, I don't have anything else. Is there a motion to recess into executive session on personnel and legal matters?
I'll make that motion.
Thank you, Councilmember Mark Johnson, Councilmember Martin.